Michael Bisping and Paul Felder shared their thoughts on Cory Sandhagen's call-out of Sean O'Malley, both praising the Sandman's new, passive-aggressive approach to challenging opponents. Felder in particular believes this fight needs to happen, siding with Cory's stance that O'Malley shouldn't get an immediate rematch for the title. He also emphasized that stylistically, this would be an incredibly entertaining fight for the fans, and that Suga, as a former champion, needs to stay active and take on top contenders instead of waiting on a title shot. Bisping, meanwhile, highlighted how a rematch with O'Malley would actually benefit Merab Dvalishvili the most. He pointed out that Sean is the biggest name in the division and the biggest money fight available, making him the ideal opponent for the champ if the UFC prioritizes business over rankings. While Sandhagen is pushing hard for the fight, Bisping acknowledged that O'Malley's star power might influence matchmaking decisions, that while rankings and merit matter, the business side of the sport often takes priority.
I've said that I'd love to see that fight before. That fight would be extremely exciting, and Cory's just sitting around waiting. Make that happen. And I agree with Cory that I don't think that fight makes sense for him to get a rematch with Merab. I think he needs to fight somebody else and prove himself again, and that fight is fun. It's another tall, rangy striker who brings the action every time he's in there. Make it happen. It makes sense. Sean needs to fight somebody, man. You can't just... These guys, they get to the peak, they get to the belt, and they sit around and it's like they just want to get right back there. And it's like, it just doesn't work like that, especially in a division. When you're in a division that's filled with studs and people that can be the next in line, it's hard to get right back in there.
For Merab Dvalishvili, another rematch with Sean O'Malley would be great for him because he'd make money, because Sean O'Malley is a draw. But that is a logical matchup. If Cory Sandhagen isn't booked, there it is. I mean, Sean O'Malley's still number one. Cory Sandhagen's number 4. Merab's the champ. There's your number 1 contender matchup.
Josh Thompson, speaking on the Weighing In podcast, responded to critics who claimed that Israel Adesanya was never that good following his loss to Nasruddin Imavov. He dismissed that notion, emphasizing that Izzy was an elite fighter, an absolute animal in the cage, and a sniper on the feet. However, he acknowledged that, like every great fighter, once they suffer a loss, opponents begin to figure out a blueprint to beat them. Thompson credited Alex Pereira for first exposing Adesanya's weaknesses, particularly his struggles when forced to fight moving backward. He explained that Adesanya's tall, lanky frame worked to his advantage when facing shorter opponents like Kelvin Gastelum and Robert Whittaker. But as the division evolved, more physically imposing and well-rounded fighters have been able to exploit his vulnerabilities. With Imavov now adding to that blueprint, Thompson suggested that Izzy's future success may depend on his ability to adapt and adjust his game. His future remains uncertain, with speculation about a potential move to 205 or even retirement.
That dude is an animal. He was an animal. He was a sniper. But just like every single fighter, okay, and it's going to come for all of them, is what happens is once they lose, kind of the blueprint is on how to beat him. Poatan came out and laid out the blueprint on how to beat him. Walked him down, threw big shots. You know, he doesn't fight as good going backwards. Sure, he's got knockouts, you know, kind of leaning back over Robert Whittaker in those kind of exchanges. But let's be honest, he has that tall, long, lanky body that benefited him when he wasn't fighting guys that were as tall as him. You know, Kelvin Gastelum, Robert Whittaker, not as long as him. Those guys. Is Izzy, was this like a fraud check for Izzy, or was this he was never that good? That's a bunch of bullshit. Izzy was the man. And I'm gonna die on that hill, man. This kid was phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. But once you lose, the confidence isn't what it was when you were making the rise. That's one. 2 is the blueprints have now been laid out on how to beat you. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone can do it.
In a recent interview with Spanish outlet El Chiringuito, UFC featherweight champion Ilia Topuria shared the unsettling experience of running into Conor McGregor, revealing a sharp contrast between the fighter he once admired and the man he encountered in person. While El Matador acknowledged McGregor's family life, including his wife and children, he also expressed concern about the darker energy he felt. He alluded to McGregor's struggles, suggesting that the former champion seems more consumed by issues like alcohol and drugs than the career-driven fighter he once was. Their interaction took place at a UFC event, and Topuria couldn't shake the sense of negativity that surrounded McGregor. He vividly recalled feeling an overwhelming urge to keep his distance. The vibe was so heavy that Ilia swore it felt like McGregor's aura came from hell, an energy he had never felt before. Even though Conor had been a childhood idol, Ilia said the meeting didn't resonate with him at all. The person he had become was far removed from the figure he once looked up to, and it left him feeling disillusioned. I met Conor once, yeah. Look, I'm analyzing people as human beings. I can't really judge him because I don't know him, but when Conor was around, it was impossible to ignore the unsettling feeling. All I could think was, stay away, stay away. There was this palpable bad energy that surrounded him. It was as if his presence carried this darkness, like his aura came straight from hell. I couldn't get away from him fast enough. The vibe was just so negative, something I had never felt before in my life. The Conor I looked up to as a kid, the one I admired, isn't the same anymore. Meeting him didn't mean anything to me. He's changed, and all the admiration I had for him is gone now. What I thought of him back then doesn't even apply to who he is now. He is more focused on drugs and alcohol than his career. Sean Strickland explains why his fight style changed from gym wars to boring UFC fights. Strickland has been known for his fiery sparring sessions, which often go viral due to their intensity. However, when it comes to actual fights, some fans have critiqued his more methodical approach, noting that his fights tend to lack the chaos seen in his gym sessions. This contrast has led to some disappointment, with expectations being set high after seeing Strickland's brutal sparring performances. Heading into his UFC 312 showdown with middleweight champion Dricus du Plessis, Strickland has tried to add an element of excitement by calling for a pre-fight agreement, hoping to limit any grappling exchanges between them. This strategy suggests he's looking for a stand-up war, which could be a more thrilling encounter than their previous bout. After Strickland's victory over Paulo Costa, there was criticism regarding his fight style, with some labeling it as slow and overly tactical, especially compared to the fireworks he creates in sparring. In a recent interview with ESPN, Strickland explained his slower pace in the octagon, attributing it to a more calculated approach in real fights. Despite the grueling sparring wars that have earned him a reputation for aggressive training, Strickland clarified that in a fight, his focus is on controlling the pace and conserving energy for the later rounds. Quote, "The difference is when you're fighting world-class fighters. Like we had Johnny Eblin out of Bellator here. You watch me and Johnny fight, it's a chess match. World-class striking meets world-class striking. You'll watch the pinnacle of any sport and you're like, why is it different? Because I'm fighting the very best. So you bring in anybody who is not a top world champion, it's easy. But you bring in an elite level striker who has trained their entire life for this moment and it's a chess match. 4-ounce gloves with a cage. It's harder to see, but there's a reason that every time I lose a decision, the guy's face looks like he's been hit by a truck and all I have is a black eye or a scratch." End quote. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for daily MMA news.